and welcome to COVID Cast episode number 4. My name is Jonathan Swift. I am the Content Director of Insurance Age and Insurance Post. And today we'll be looking at the subject of what insurance businesses are doing in terms of charitable donations and keeping engaged with communities during the coronavirus pandemic. Now, I'm delighted to say that joining me today to discuss this, I have Grant from QBE, Steve from Zurich, Kellyanne from Towergate, and Chris Pitt from Ecclesiastical. Hello all.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
So I'll start with you, Kellyanne. Can I just ask, it is because you're the top left of my screen, so
Right, okay, fair enough.
why is it important to engage with communities at times of distress, such as, this whole COVID-19 pandemic?
I've been thinking about this question because you very kindly gave me sight of it before this conversation, and actually what it did was it reminded me of when we going back to when we created the charity 2 years ago. So we created a charitable trust called the Ardonagh Community Trust, and part of the thesis behind that and the thinking around why that was necessary and why that would work is that as insurance companies and insurance broking companies, there's a mirror image, isn't there? Because insurers and brokers are there for people at times of need. So as an industry, we step up and we help people in times of crisis, and that is what we do. As that is why we are here, and so we sort of use that as a guiding principle behind creating the trust. And that mirror image is really interesting right now, because not only are we stepping up to assist people, help with claims, help them understand what their policies may or may not do for them, but actually because we are embedded in communities through, in my example, in the case of Towergate, which is part of the Ardonagh Group, through a branch network, a UK-wide branch network with a geographical UK footprint, we are embedded in those communities. So we therefore have not only an opportunity, but in our opinion, a responsibility to step in and rise up and help outside of what our job expects us to do and what our roles as brokers expect us to do. And we're lucky to be able to have that because we live and work in those communities. We're members of the chambers of commerce. We're members of the golf clubs. We shop. We socialise. We're in school playgrounds, and that community broking gives us that opportunity. So yeah, that mirror image between stepping up and helping people in crisis, we took that across to the Ardonagh Community Trust, or ACT as we call it, and that's the premise of which that charity was built. And this crisis, this awful situation that we find ourselves in now, is the perfect opportunity for us to step up and rise up beyond, like I say, the realms of what we do in our day-to-day jobs.
Steve?
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you very much for inviting me on this. I think it's very similar to what Kellyanne's been saying, really. And my first point that I was going to make is that actually I think it's worth saying right from the outset that I believe insurance companies and all other companies for that matter should have a role to play in engaging with their communities, full stop, anyway. And certainly from Zurich's perspective, the Zurich Community Trust, which I have the privilege of being the head on, we have been sort of running for 46 years now. So, we've been there for a long period of time over supporting our local communities. I mean, specifically though, turning to COVID-19, clearly it's important at the moment. And what really resonates with me is what Zurich in the UK have sort of set out as 3 guiding principles in relation to COVID-19. The first of those is that we will do our very best to be flexible. The second one of those is that we would support our customers and our distributors with excellent service. And the third one, very crucially for the conversation that we're having now, is we will use our expertise and resources to help the communities in which we live and work. And I think each of those 3 guiding principles, whilst they're there, they've been set by the business. I think we could take each one of those and they're equally applicable to the work of the Community Trust as well.
Grant?
Yeah, I think the word that has really resonated in this conversation for me is around community. I think we've got used to businesses making charitable donations. We've got used to businesses talking about sort of giving money away, but it's sometimes a little bit distant, and it sometimes feels like giving a big check rather than thinking about what's really at the end of it. And the comment about us being part of the community, us having a responsibility to the community, wanting to make a difference in that community is what I think is so much more than just the financial element. So we're trying very hard as a QBE Foundation to make sure that, yes, we're an insurance company. Yes, it's important that that we have a good, strong business. But the really important thing is making a difference to people's lives. And if we don't do that, then what are we as a business? You know, we've got to be something that makes a difference in what we do professionally and in the way we engage with those communities. So that's the important thing for me, not just the fact that we are trying to donate, but the fact that we're actually looking at the best way of doing that in the areas that we all operate.
And finally, come to you, Chris.
Yeah, I'd agree, and I'd say it's always important, but it's particularly important right now. And I think often people see communities as a separate thing. You know, there's your employees, there's your customers, and there's your communities, and you've got to think about what are you doing for each. But actually, when you're talking about your communities, that's touching your employees, that's touching your customers. So I think it's very much part of an overarching approach to what kind of business you are, you know, what kind of impact you want to have in the world and on society. So I think, yes, it's important that we give as successful, sustainable businesses. I think that's another obligation, you know, as an industry that's helping people. I think those points are really well made. This is another way in which we should be helping people.
So can I ask, Chris, what in particular are you doing at Ecclesiastical at the moment in relation to COVID-19 and local communities?
So Ecclesiastical is one of the UK's largest corporate givers. So we're always priding ourselves on responding charitably in a wide range of ways. And we're fortunate that we're charitably owned. So our owner plays a big part in that process as well. But I think the thing I'd emphasise about any charitable giving approach is I don't think there's any wrong way to give. I think any giving is good giving, but actually there's a real spectrum of ways to give that have a different impact. So in our organisation, our charitable owner is giving large transformational grants to charities which are kind of building community infrastructure, and I think that's a really, really important approach. We're also giving small donations quickly to charities fighting on the front line, so through a corporate giving programme that we've got, Movement for Good. We're also doing that through our people, so our people, will come on to this in a bit, have the opportunity to give small grants to charities close to them as well. So I think that broad approach is the most effective one, and it's about charities facing financial difficulty because of the current situation. So that is any cause, any charity, but it's also charities helping communities in particular recover.
Steve, what is Zurich doing as well, more specifically on in this area?
I'll answer that in two parts, if I may. One from what the trust is doing through its charitable arm, and also what the business is doing. So within the Zurich Community Trust, we've developed a £2 million package of support, and that sort of forms the heart of really what our COVID-19 response plan is. Worth putting that in the context of a sort of a global side of things, in that Zurich globally is looking to invest somewhere in the region of sort of $30 million as part of its community investment contribution for COVID-19. But the 2 million in the UK, and that is, we've sort of decided to focus basically all of our efforts, the vast majority of our efforts this year, towards COVID-19. And what we're doing with that money is we're very much focusing our funding response. We'll come on to sort of some of the volunteering, I'm sure, later, but we're very much focusing our funding response on supporting those organisations that we already have an existing partnership with. So we all know that we could be swamped by demands when charities are 50% of charities are seeing a huge reduction in income and so forth. You know, there is the demand is so high. So we've decided to focus very much on those ones that we have an existing partnership with. Those organisations, they can range from a sort of a small number of large household names who we work in partnership with, through to a really great many number of local organisations that are close to where Zurich has its offices around the UK. And crucially, what we've said to those partners in a very much a phased approach to our grant giving this year, that we're going to be there for them throughout 2020. So whilst money is available now, no need to rush for it. If you don't really need it now, we are going to be there for you right the way through this as this situation unfolds and we really do realise the gravity of how this is going to leave charities. But just to give you a flavour of how our support is helping on the ground, I mean, one of the organisations I was talking to the other day was a soup kitchen in London that we support. That soup kitchen has now seen sort of unprecedented demand. 4 other nearby facilities have closed down. They're now getting a totally new audience, if I can put it like that, or client group, which is coming through, a much younger group, a much older group than they would traditionally see. And I think really what brings it home is when you see that actually some of those arriving at the soup kitchen now are just arriving because it's the only place that they can find water out in the streets. So there's a real need there, and the £15,000, for example, in that case, is just being used to keep the lights on and keep people being fed over the course of the next 6 weeks. If I just turn to Zurich, the business side of things, then sort of organisationally what we're doing, then we have supplied 350,000 surgical masks to several organisations, including hospitals around the UK, which Zurich did have as part of a pandemic preparedness approach that we had developed. We're making our sort of risk engineering expertise freely available on our sort of dedicated coronavirus website. And we're also providing a 3-month free extension to our small charity customers as well as making our sort of Safer Schools app, which educates schools and families on staying safe online. We're giving that now to all of our Zurich municipal customers. So it's that double-edged thing. It's what the business is doing and what the trust is doing.
Kellyanne?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways that the people of Ardonagh can access funds via the community trust. And what we've done is essentially, and this has been touched on, is if we're trying to react quickly to the changes in which way people need to access those funds. So we provide and pay grants out to charities and causes, and we have shifted our focus away in terms of the application process towards coronavirus and companies and charities that are being impacted directly as a result of the pandemic. We're also relaxing our rules a little bit around match funding to allow people to undertake activities at home to raise money for causes that they choose. We're also actively encouraging volunteering through our volunteer days. We've donated a lump sum to Mind, the charity Mind, and they are our corporate charity partner. And they actually put out an emergency appeal because they are so incredibly busy, as you can imagine right now, and need extra funds quickly. So again, it's all about speed. We reacted quickly to that. We pulled our trustees together. We acted outside of the cycle of our usual board meetings to access cash and grant cash quickly. So that's behind everything that we're doing. But again, in terms of a guiding principle around how we're acting and behaving at the moment, there's obviously the requests and the needs from the sort of NHS front line and the workers who are helping to fight the disease, and that's one thing. But what's actually happening is what's being left behind within those communities, again, to go back to the community word, is that the charity is not directly impacted in that way, but that those who rely on society being open are struggling and are close to closing down. So playgrounds for disabled children, respite, domestic violence respite homes, you name it, those charities are saying to us, we may not survive without small cash injections. So whilst we don't have pockets deep enough to solve the crisis within the NHS, what we can do is we can plug back into the community and we can help those smaller charities who need cash injections of £5,000–10,000 and help those, so that the people that turn to those for help don't then need to turn to the NHS because those places are closing down. Because actually, if you take out of society those smaller charities who help those different groups of people in need, where do they go? They go to the NHS. That's where they go. So actually, what we're trying to do is ease the burden, which is what we're all trying to do at the moment by staying at home, but ease the burden on the NHS by actually trying to keep those causes and charities ticking over as much as we possibly can, so that those people don't, out of desperation, try and visit their GP, try and turn up at an A&E department, end up in a hospital. So that's where we're sort of focusing our efforts, and those £5,000–10,000 lump sums actually make all the difference between these local causes closing and staying open.
Grant?
Yes. similar to some things others have said. I think QBE is fortunate that we do this stuff all year round anyway. We're typically quite plugged into this part of society. So we were able to activate some existing partnerships that we had when COVID-19 struck. So we front loaded the grants that we'd normally give out over the course of a year into the first quarter to our corporate partners that we already have there. So the Red Cross, Save the Children, Mind and Crisis, we've given them substantial grants in the six figures in the first quarter of this year. We've also then had to look and decided to look consciously towards continental Europe as well. Some of the countries that we operate in that have been particularly badly hit that could otherwise be perhaps overlooked. So we've looked for equivalent local partners in Italy, in Spain, France and Germany to make sure that we're recognising how tough things are over there. So that's been an important part of what we do. And volunteering was touched on earlier. Now, obviously, we, as an industry and QBE, we all participate in volunteering programs, and that's become quite common now. But all of that has had to be reappraised in light of social distancing and people working from home. So we did face a situation where volunteering was something that was likely to grind to a bit of a halt. We've managed to activate some sort of virtual volunteering programs that people can do from home. So we've activated a scheme for people to be able to participate in a call with an older person who might be isolated and not have an enormous amount of contact with people during the day. People can sign up to spend half an hour talking to someone who might otherwise not talk to someone because they're isolated. We're activating a program for people to perhaps run quizzes for care homes that are isolated as well. See some of my fellow participants scribbling this down, so I hope that's some good ideas people are taking away from what I'm saying. I'll take that as a positive. So it's been good to be able to sort of be flexible about what we do, change how we operate some of this stuff to make sure that we can still respond to what people need or make a difference to people, even though most of us are now stuck in front of a screen rather than being out in the open.
So Grant, are you finding it kind of difficult to keep staff engaged in terms of your charitable ambitions and objectives during the lockdown?
Well, it's certainly something that we have to think about differently. And if we just had the same offering, I think people would have quickly said, well, you know, how does that work for me? What can I do? I can't run the London Marathon. I can't do this sort of thing. So we've tried to relax our rules, as I think someone mentioned earlier, around fundraising to make sure that we can match people's fundraising in a different way or match donations rather than fundraising if that's what people want to do. And as I mentioned earlier, the volunteering is something that, you know, we used to get certain benefits from it around team working, around people being out of the office for a day and doing something different. We're now probably getting rather different benefits from it, which is people engaging with a different section of the community, people actually kind of brushing up some of their skills around talking to people who are different to themselves and that sort of thing. So I think in some ways it's given us an opportunity to freshen things up. It's given us an opportunity to look at what comes next on volunteering or what comes next on fundraising. We've often run competitions or schemes around people naming their own charities and putting them forward for grants, which is what we've always tried to do. That's something we'll do again this year, and I think we'll see some different names come to the fore that we probably wouldn't have done otherwise as more people see a need to get involved. So it's certainly been a challenge, but there are a lot of opportunities out there to still make it work.
Chris?
Yeah, I think in terms of keeping staff engaged, keeping people connected, I think is really important, but real connection is being part of it. So I think giving employees a chance to give is really kind of strong and core to our offer. So our employee giving program has a personal grant. So I get a personal grant I can give to any charity of my choice. And if I volunteer, I can double it. And so we've maintained that offer and we're promoting it now, saying it's something you can do in front of your screen. And we're relaxing the rules around volunteering. So you can give that grant with the promise of volunteering in the future. So that's a really important part, I think, of being connected, is actually being able to do something. We've got a similar scheme actually run with some of our closer brokers where we give them grants to give. So we're saying, you know who needs support in your communities. So, let's help you support them. I think that piece about volunteering, flexibility has been really important. We very quickly, published a bit of a volunteering policy update and made sure people are really aware of as much as what you really can't do, because your well-being, you know, has to be paramount. Also what we encourage you to do. So there's lots more virtual volunteering opportunities out there. And I think, as has been mentioned, I think that's really interesting opportunity to kind of move us away from the kind of digging and decorating traditional view of volunteering, that, you know, you can really support charities in lots of different ways. So those are probably, yeah, the main ways we're keeping staff connected, and, you know, and telling the stories of the corporate giving campaigns that we've got going on. And I suppose that is a benefit of people being in front of their screens. They can read the stories of the huge difference that some of that funding's making.
Steve?
Yeah, I'd echo what some of what Grant and Chris have already been saying. I mean, the engagement of Zurich in the UK, Zurich employees in the UK, to the work of the trust has been sort of crucially important to us over the years, and really sort of forms the very sort of essence of what we do. I mean, through the trust, we reckon we get somewhere in the region of about 40% of Zurich employees in the UK volunteering through activity that we broker through the trust. We've got about 22% of Zurich employees give to the Zurich Community Trust grant making programs through their payroll each month. So it's a really sort of big deal for us and so forth. But exactly what Grant was saying earlier, it's about sort of just stripping all that back into, certainly from a volunteering perspective, and thinking, okay, well, what different things can we actually be doing now? And I would agree, it certainly made us look at some different things, come up with different ideas, but also to try and sort of amplify some of the things that we've already had going for a number of years. So many years ago, we set up with what was Help the Aged then, but as obviously as now as Age UK, a telephone befriending scheme called Call in Time. So we've now got a good number of employees who are volunteering through that program, and have been volunteering for years, to make a sort of a weekly phone call to an isolated or lonely older person, or someone who's been recently bereaved or come out of hospital and so forth. So we're able to sort of amplify that thing. We're able to bring in sort of different telephone type based things. We've got about 50 people on standby to be sort of an overspill resource to the NHS 111 service and so forth. So that was a request that came our way. So we're able to sort of turn out any spare capacity we've got in the call centres around that side of things. And then I think it's very much looking at that sort of skill-based support and how we can actually deploy that. We've got a wealth of skills, as there would be in Ecclesiastical, in Towergate, in QBE and so forth. So we're going back to those very same partners that we're working with, which probably sort of number sort of 60 or 70 across the UK with those at the very local level, is thinking about, well, what skills have we actually got that we can try and sort of impart to those organisations to help them through this. So we're developing a suite of sort of webinars, workshops, drop-in surgeries, all delivered virtually, to help equip those charities around, you know, the first couple we're putting out is around sort of external PR, digital marketing, those sort of things. But there's a whole range of other ones coming on stream around building resilience and risk mitigation and so forth. But then at the more sort of personal level, looking at some of the skills-based stuff in terms of, somebody touched upon it earlier, but around helping set up like a carers cafe over Zoom, working with a local carer support group and so forth. So trying to do that side of it. Of course, employee fundraising is a big thing. We've worked from day one. We've got behind the National Emergencies Trust Appeal, so we've launched that. The first monies have now gone across to the National Emergencies Trust behind that. Everything that the employees donate is 100% matched. And we're also doing a similar approach with the big night in this Thursday as well. And then finally, probably just worth saying that we've just started a new relationship with an organisation called the Good Gym, who are basically a community of about 20,000 runners who come together for obviously their own physical and mental well-being, but to do social good as well. So we've just started a new partnership with them, but as they've had to switch their activities, obviously due to the social distancing, what our employees are now going to be encouraged to get involved in is around telephone support and the delivery of food and medicines in conjunction with the local agencies. So question of looking at it from afresh again, but I think there's some really good ideas which have come out of it, which I'm sure just won't stay just for COVID-19, but are there for the years to come as well.
Finally, Kellyanne.
Yeah, so Ardonagh is a relatively young company, the Ardonagh Group, really, 2.5, 3 years old, and the group and the trust were formed at the same time. So what that meant was that the trust is really the backbone of the group, of the culture. It's essentially a communications channel, and that's how we've always used it and deployed our ideas. And what that's meant for us is that our workforce are really engaged with the charity and with what the charity represents. We're a really disparate group geographically, but also in terms of what we do, because across our different segments, so we've got London wholesale broking, we have personal lines broking, retail, insurance broking, you know, a community high street branch network, underwriting, you name it, we kind of do it. So actually the charity is what overarches all of those different companies and very different cultures, and we all plug into it, and that's the one thing we all have in common. So we're playing really strongly on that now. It's not dictated from the centre or from the top. That culture and the trust itself and where the money goes and how the money is raised is owned and dictated by the people of Ardonagh, and we've always tried really hard to do that. So at the moment you can't over communicate, and that's, you know, and we all know that. So but we are over communicating, and we're showcasing what we're doing to help charities, as someone else mentioned, but we're turning things on their head and we're being flexible, which I think is a really strong theme here. So going back to the idea of the ownership of the charity is with our people and it's their choice. We have an annual fundraising day where we raise funds for ACT, which are then deployed into local causes, but we're turning that on its head this year. We're bringing the date forward because we're recognising the urgency, and we're turning it on its head so that actually our people will raise money and give back to charities of their choice in their local communities. So rather than raising for ACT, we've given it back, given the power back to our people and said, we will support you, we will match everything you raise, and then you push that money back out to your communities where your offices are. And you know, we've got nearly 100 offices, so this is money pouring out into communities all over pockets of the UK. We also have spent the last couple of years training our people in mental health first aid. So we have an army of mental health first aiders, and we've worked with MHFA to create that. And they are rising up into a really important space right now, because again, in terms of engagement, how are we engaging with our workforce, we're recognising that this time is hugely challenging in terms of mental health and well-being. So our mental health first aiders are rising up, and they are helping to have conversations with people who might need help right now. And we're also, through our partnership with Mine, we're providing e-learning and webinars, again, specifically addressing the sort of mental health and well-being issues that are arising at this time. So yeah, but it's across various different platforms, but essentially in terms of engagement, Jonathan, the charity for us is an engagement tool. Like, you know, to revisit my earlier point, it's what brings us all together, and we've seen that so strongly in the face of coronavirus. It's been something quite incredible, really.
Well, there you go. Thank you very much. I would like to say a big thank you to Kellyanne, to Steve, to Chris, and also to Grant. There's obviously a lot of great stuff going on out there. I'd like to thank you again for watching. Stay tuned to the next episode, and also stay safe. Until the next episode, goodbye.